Welcome to all the Team Plano members. We appreciate your time and joining us today to talk a little bit about the budget. As most of you know, we passed the budget, or excuse me, the City Council passed the budget on Monday night. And there's a lot in that document. So we wanted to take some time to really walk through what is contained in the budget, what was passed by council this past Monday and goes into effect October 1st, and really walk through some of the elements that were funded this year. Let me start with a few aspects. Number one, this year was really the tale of two years. We started off the first part of the year under some COVID lockdowns for businesses. And so our revenues, what we were experiencing from the city perspective, what we were experiencing as a community and as an economy was really affected by the first half of the year being much slower and at a reduced level. And then the second half of the year was really about reopening. It was about vaccines being available, businesses being able to open at 75 and then 100%. And we've seen a great deal of that impact in our revenues. So the city has really seen a very strong rebound in a number of fees, things like our Parks and Rec fees for classes, our sales tax, and one fund that has done exceptionally well the entire time has actually been our golf course fund. So we've seen those things happen over the course of this year. And we begin the budget cycle really right after the first of the year. And it's a team approach. So I would be remiss if I didn't stop real quick and thank the team that puts this together. Karen Rhodes and her budget staff work tirelessly to put everything together. I have my deputies who you're going to hear from, Shelly Seamer, Jack Carr, Greg Russian. We also have Denise Tackey, we have Shantae Akafia, Shauna Haley. But it's all of our executive team really works collectively to put this together and bring forward what the needs are of the organization for the council to consider. And we are grateful for the support of the city council. Their vote to move this budget forward gives us the resources we need to provide programs and services to the community. So 3 years ago, when I became city manager, 2.5 years ago, we started off third budget 2.5 years ago. We started off with several goals for the organization that we really build the budget around. The first is our people and taking care of our people. The second is our infrastructure and making sure that we have quality infrastructure. Third is programs and services and making sure we have high quality, very responsive programs and services. Fourth is financial policies. And fifth is affordability, and that applies really to our tax rate. So we have those 5 goals, and every year, the last 3 years, we have focused on those and how the budget goes to contribute to those. The budget contributes to those, and that's one of 2 of our main strategic documents that we look at as we're putting together our programs and services. The budget really provides the funding for our programs and services, but we use those programs and services to help achieve the strategic goals of the city council. So the budget and the strategic plan for the city council are really those 2 strategic plans that we count on when we're building the city programs and services and everything we put out to the community. So we have those 5 elements. You're going to hear from each of the deputies about those, and then I will handle a couple towards the end. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and push it over to Shelly Seamer to talk about taking care of our people and people side of things.
All right, thank you, Mark. Yes, I look forward to talking about the fun part, which is the people part of the budget. And as you all know, our employees are our greatest asset, and approximately 2/3 of the total operating budget is allocated to salary and benefit costs. So our goal is to continue to attract and retain high-performing individuals to provide the programs and services that Plano is known to expect. And we recognize we're always in a competitive market, but particularly this year, it's hard to get good employees and hard to keep them. So we know we must compete for talent in the market. Part of our compensation philosophy is to look at our market cities on a regular basis. This year, HR looked at our market competitives. It's a standard comparators for our general government, as well as a little bit, it's 13 cities. And then for police and fire, it's defined a little bit differently, but they're the same every time we look. And we also tap the private sector to see what is trending in the private sector. So we continue to monitor the market for salaries and compensation. And the other part of the philosophy I wanted to bring up is, many of you probably know this, but we set our salaries at the market median plus 5%. So we try to lead the market with our competitive cities, and that market median for the general government is set at midpoint. And then HR will build the ranges from there. We also have a philosophy, and we are implementing this year, is if a employee has been in their position for 6 years, not just with the city for 6 years, but in their current position, they will be moved to midpoint. And we call that 6 years in the position, you'll come to midpoint. So you'll be at that market median plus 5%. And the city manager has asked that we look at that every budget year. It's been 6 years since our classification and compensation study was implemented. And so we are, the city manager has committed as that is a priority as well when we're looking at compensation. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Of course, we want to treat the employees that we have here well, but also part of that is to look at the workload and manage resources. And some of that this year includes some new positions. There are 13 new full-time positions and 12 part-time positions. And of the full-time positions, I'll list those real quick. 3 are tied to public safety programs. One is a police records applications analyst that will be primarily assigned to their records management system. Another is a supervisor in emergency management and an animal services officer. Then we have 6 in the capital improvement project support for projects that are coming online. There are 4 in Parks and Rec, 2 equipment operators, 1 electrical technician, and 1 plumbing and pool technician. And then 1 in engineering, which is a franchise utility coordinator, and another in streets as a construction inspector. The other 4 are to respond to and to help augment some of the current workload. 2 are in environmental health. They are environmental quality specialists, where they will inspect various construction projects to ensure that construction debris does not get into the waterways. And the other 2 are in technology services, a business analyst and a security engineer. And I'll elaborate a bit on the last one, is that focuses mostly to ensure our cybersecurity is top notch. To elaborate a little bit more of what's included for our compensation and benefits side for our current employees, you all did receive, I believe, the information from the city manager and then also from human resources. But this budget includes a 3% across the board increase for all employees. And as you know, the last year was a challenge, and the city manager was able to put in at mid-year a 2% increase. And so he has made that a priority to be implemented a 3% across the board at the first paycheck of the fiscal year. And like I mentioned just a little bit ago, tying and looking at the market to make sure we are competitive. I will also add a component that I really value in Plano is that it's not just having good people, but it's equipping them and training them to do the job that they're hired to do. So we place a high value on training and the equipment that we provide. And then finally, I wanted to highlight this year, there will be no increase to employee benefit premiums. So that is something I think we all at times take for granted. The benefit package that we have here is extremely robust. There has only been one premium increase in the last 12 years. And I don't think any city around us could say that. Now, that doesn't mean it will be that way every year. So I will qualify that, but I did want you all to know that that is something that comes from really good financial planning, and I think some really good benefit reviews from the Human Resources Department. So with that, I will pass it on to Jack.
So Shelley is a tough act to follow. You know, we talk about 3% across the board pay increases, no increase or changes in any of our benefits. So she really does a good job with her presentation. So I get to talk about a different kind of asset. We've heard that our employees are the greatest asset, but our infrastructure is a different kind of asset. The water, the sewer, the paving, the drainage, our buildings, our park system. It's $2.7 billion worth of improvements that we have. And to maintain those improvements is so important. It's like your car. If you don't maintain your car, you don't change the oil, after a few years, you've got this blue cloud that's following you around town and your car is going to break down because of that. So what we do is we have some money that we set aside to actually maintain and construct those assets. And that's in our community investment program, our CIP. Some people call it the capital improvements program. That's funded by the GEO bonds, revenue bonds, grants, fees. This year, we have another opportunity. We have some more funds coming from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan Act. We call it ARPA. And it's $18.2 million that is coming from the federal government. And the council has directed $8 million of that to our traffic signal system. And $7 million of it is going to go into the capital maintenance program for the Ridgeview pump station generators, sidewalk repairs. At our police station, we have some foundation repairs and remodeling that needs to be done. And then at the Douglas Community Center, the roof replacement and repairs there. ARPA funds are also going to be used to help shore up the rec revolving fund and the convention and tourism fund, because they've been hit hard by the economic times that we're in right now. But as we add construction projects, we add more buildings, spaces, we need to make sure that we're not overloading the existing staff, make sure that the resources that we need are there for us. So each year we take a look at the impact those projects will have coming online. So implementation of the projects for this coming year, we're going to have 2.3 million in the general fund for next year. Of that, we're going to have 1.4 million for one-time non-recurring expenses associated with outfitting the facilities, putting furniture, fixtures, equipment, purchasing vehicles, technology for new positions. And then we also have additional ongoing expenditures spread across the Parks and Recreation Department, $550,000 there. Engineering is going to get $98,000, Public Works $101,000, facilities $59,000. Let me drill down a little bit deeper on those elements. So $47,000 is for the High Point maintenance facility for the O&M, operation and maintenance, custodial expenses for that project after it comes online. So we're only going to have 8 months of operation because the project is still under construction. But after it's completed, 8 months of that is going to cost $47,000. So the Carpenter Sports Complex, $12,000 for that project after it comes online. That's going to be 7 months of O&M and utility maintenance. 1.2 million is for the Fire Training Center for equipment and apparatus for that facility. 408,000 for the Oak Point Nature Preserve Hillside improvements for an electrical technician, grounds maintenance, custodial services, and materials to supply and support those improvements. $108,000 is for the Russell Creek synthetic turf fields for an equipment operator and for O&M. $228,000 is for the Oak Point Recreation Center pool renovation for a technician and part-time temporary lifeguards and recreation aides. And of that, out of that project, we're going to have additional revenue in the amount of $100,000. So everything I've been talking about so far has been expenses, but this one's going to have some revenue that spins out of it. So that's good to offset that that added cost. Continuing on, we have $275,000 for a utility coordinator and construction inspector to manage the additional construction projects. We need to make sure that those projects are completed correctly. So an inspector will make sure the contractor is doing the work right and we don't have premature failures for constructed projects. The last project on this list is $85,000 for living screen program for irrigation and maintenance costs associated with the additional living screens. These items I just listed make up the $2.3 million in additional O&M costs resulting from the CIP projects coming online next year. The CIP budget is 450 pages of really a lot of detail that's inserted in there for the 5-year program. Now, keep in mind that we just talked about the first year of the program, which is the budget, but then there's another 4 years of the program, which is really a plan looking forward to what we'll be doing in the following years. So now I turn it over to Greg, talk about programs and services.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. You know, I'm very lucky today. I didn't have to summarize 450 pages like Jack had to do, but I still am going to talk, though, about programs and services. This is really where the rubber meets the road on quality of life issues for our citizens. You know, in each new budget, we have limited new revenues to distribute. And Mark went over a bit about the comprehensive budget process that we have that includes our citizens, our council, our own employees to determine how to disperse those new funds that we have. You also heard about the upcoming new budget, that the compensation was the city manager's #1 priority this year. And you see that in the raises we got in April, the raises we have now, and some of the adjustments you see that are going to be upcoming as well. We have no new services or programs in the FY 21-22 budget, but there is additional funding included to fully support our existing programs and services. I'm going to briefly go over the highlights from our general fund for this in the upcoming budget. First of all, looking at the police department, they need a new records management system. It's about 20 years old. And rather than try to fund it all next budget year, we're going to put $1 million in for next year and $1 million or whatever the remainder is for the year after, because that's probably how long it's going to take to come online. We also have $200,000 for a comprehensive health and wellness program for the sworn employees. This is very similar to the program that the fire department has. It's been very successful there. The fire department has about $1.5 million in new funding for service demands. First of all, a lot of it is centered around the training center. You heard Jack mention that earlier. If you haven't been out there, that's in McDermott and Robinson, and it's about halfway built, maybe a little bit more than halfway. Early next year, it's supposed to be open for the grand opening. So go by and take a look at it. It's very interesting. We have $1 million in training props. We have a SkyTrack vehicle for lifting heavy equipment. Part of that is we have a building that's actually looks like it's collapsed. It's built that way so they can practice in collapsed vehicles, and that SkyTrack vehicle will come in handy for that. Also, the retention of an engine to serve as a reserve apparatus. They're going to use it at the fire training center to train, but should they need it, they can also call it into action. Other items not necessarily associated with the training center include additional equipment for special operations teams, equipment for swift water rescue operations, an additional reserve ambulance for those overload situations that we've seen in the past year. In the fire department, we have to watch very closely the times on ambulance response. Whenever you have a heart attack or another emergency, seconds matter. You may have some very bad outcomes if you don't get there as soon as you can and get somebody treated into the hospital. And so we're going to do this as a stopgap, and then the next budget year look at maybe if we need to add another ambulance and the 7 firefighters that would go with that as well. We have an officer development training program they're going to bring in as well, very similar to what the Plano Police Department has right now and has had for years. And also RFID inventory management system. Parks and Rec has $887,000 in supplemental funding for next year. They have 3 department of vehicles coming online and associated costs, about $300,000 in increased operations and maintenance. You know, as we go through from year to year, we see increases in prices, and we have to watch those fixed funds to make sure we increase those as we need to make sure we can pay the bills for operations and maintenance. That's just one example. Also in Parks and Rec, we've seen work done on a new synthetic turf field at Russell Creek Park and the Oak Point Recreation Center pool expansion and renovation. And Jack had alluded to this too, that, you know, we also see with some of these investments that we make, some revenues come back. We're going to see a little over $100,000 revenue in each one of those as well coming back in this next budget year. The Facility and Maintenance Services Division is going to add about $60,000 for operations and maintenance expenses to start up custodial services and waste collection at the High Point Maintenance Facility and at the Carpenter Park Sports Complex. You know, emptying the garbages and custodial service is very important for every building. And as we have these buildings come online or things change, we have to also anticipate that and fund for these as well. The engineering department is getting $602,000 for 2 things. First, the CIP software program. And this software program, as you heard earlier from Jack, we have so many CIP projects ongoing. It's incredible. And so we have to track these and do the best we can to manage these. This is not going to be just for engineering, though. It's also going to be utilized by other departments upon successful migration and beta testing. The planning department is going to get about $41,000 for a comprehensive plan market study and ArcGIS urban user licenses. The neighborhood services department is going to have mobile routers on their fleet vehicles with cellular costs included to improve the connectivity when they're in the field. Animal Services has about $90,000 in new revenue. First thing, they're going to get an Animal Services officer, a new one, because they have an increased workload. And we also have something happening with council on the 27th. They're going to look at an ordinance, a proposed ordinance, to allow backyard chickens in Plano. And I'm sure you probably read it in the newspaper and heard about it, but this is something that most other cities have, and now Plano is looking at that. And council made a positive recommendation to bring that back to look at it at the next council meeting. So Jamie is going to bring back an ordinance for that. And anytime we have additional services like this, we have to anticipate new costs as well for our manpower to be able to handle those services. And I think everybody here has probably seen the movie Rocky, where he has to go try to catch the chickens. Well, you know, tongue in cheek, they're going to have to deal with situations like that now, catching chickens when they get on the loose and things they haven't done before. But this animal services officer, this new position, really helped them with that. They also are going to have replacement body worn video cameras. I think they're a couple of generations back compared to PD. So we're going to get them those this budget year as well. Public Works has $25,000 for accreditation. And the library every year gets $1.2 million for new library books. They've added a couple $100,000 this year for digital materials and e-content. During COVID, we learned that there became a great hue and cry by the citizens where they really wanted to see this digital material and e-content. So they added more money to that account as well. And that will take care of my part, and I'll turn it back over to Mark.
Well, as you've heard, we've talked about the people, the infrastructure, now programs and services. The 4th element that we build into the budget and that we focus on is our financial policies. And these are really foundational pieces to how we build our budget. It's to make sure that we are managing in a fiscally prudent manner at all times. And so we're known as a well-managed city, and making sure that our finances are taken care of is a critical piece of that. So the city has several policies that we've put in place. One of those is a 3-year sales tax averaging policy. It's fantastic. It really takes the sales tax and predicts it in a way that helps us manage the volatility of what can happen in an economic downturn. So over the course of the last couple of years, when we've seen restaurants close and businesses slow down, we've seen a decline over a year ago for some of our sales tax. We've since seen it start to rebound, but that sales tax policy, that 3-year average, really helped save us significant volatility during that time frame. We also have a capital maintenance fund, and that is cash financing some of our asset maintenance and small repairs. That is a huge element that helps us to keep our assets in great shape and in good working condition. We have our equipment replacement fund, and that's hugely important to make sure that our rolling stock, things like mowers and vehicles, are replaced on a timely manner so that as they reach an age where they become more and more costly to maintain or need replacement, that we have funds to go ahead and take care of those when the time is needed. So that's a huge important aspect to make sure our operations stay operating at a high level. We have a new rainy day fund. This was a council directed fund. We realized that without the federal funds that we received from CARES and ARPA, we would have been in trouble over the last 18 months. We would have had a lot more serious discussions internally about how the impacts of the downturn, economic downturn, would have affected our programs and services. So the federal funds really helped us out. And in that consideration, council created a new rainy day fund, and they've started shifting some money to the rainy day fund to make sure that if we don't have federal funds and experience an economic downturn, that we have some resources available to help us weather an event such as that. We also have fund balance policies, making sure that we have enough operating revenue to continue if there is any sort of downturn. And those are all really important aspects for the current situation. We also take care of some of our future liabilities with things like our 115 trust and our other post-employment benefits. We have commitments to our employees for when they retire, and we are funding those future liabilities and making sure we're taking care of those. And so while that has certainly an impact on today, it has even more of an impact on the future in making sure that that is completely funded. So you've heard about our people, you've heard about our infrastructure, you've heard about our programs and services, and you've heard about our financial policies. All told, it is a very large budget. Our operating budget is more than $630 million. If you add in our reserves, if you add in our CIP, we're approaching $1 billion, all told, being managed and programmed. And so that's a very large budget. It takes a lot of work by a lot of people to make sure that that is well thought through and put in appropriate programs to make sure that we're utilizing that in a way that delivers on those strategic plans that we talked about earlier. And this year, all of those put together have like I said, a very large total. But this year, the City Council is taking forward and did pass the no new revenue rate. So that was an important aspect of affordability, which is our fifth component, and that's the impact on the taxpayers, both residential and commercial, because we have one tax rate that applies to all property values. And this year we've seen a slight decline in some of our commercial values, but we've seen an incline in some of the residential values, and some of those were, pretty impactful to our residences. But all told, looking at the entire amount this year, they are going to pass the no new revenue rate. So the City Council passed that on Monday night. That will go into effect October 1st. And so we will be operating under that. So with that, I wanted to again stop and thank a number of folks. Obviously the City Council who passes the budget. That's a critical component to everything, but the budget team and then our employees. Team Plano does a great job of delivering programs and services, and the budget is really designed to provide resources to our employees to make sure they can provide those programs and services. So with that, I want to open it up to questions. The chat feature is at the very bottom of the page. And so you are welcome to post any questions you might have in the chat feature, and we will see if we can answer any of those. So we'll give just a minute or two and see if anybody has anything they would like to put in there, and we'd be happy to provide a response. This isn't quite like texting where you see the three dots kind of scrolling along. But we're going to give it a few minutes to see if there's any questions out there. So Dr. Smith asked for restate the 5 priorities. So the 5 priorities are taking care of our people, taking care of our infrastructure, having great programs and services, having strong financial policies, and affordability. So those are the 5, and they've been there each of these 3 years that we've been working on the budget since I've been city manager. So those are the 5 priorities, and they really represent the organizational values. So our values really don't change. They stay the same. You have some slight nuances to them, but those stay true to who we are as Team Plano. Deb Richardson asked, is the 6-year based on anniversary date or by the end of the fiscal year? So the 6 years are in position is the way that I understand that. But Deb, that is each individual this fiscal year, by the end of the month or the first week of October, will receive a letter on any sort of adjustments that's made as far as that in-range progression. But the 6 years is really based on the time in position. Shelley, anything you want to add to that?
I think just adding that the goal will be that this is looked at every fiscal year. So each year HR will look at what that cost will be based on people being in that position for 6 years and to implement the next fiscal year. So they'll let Mark know what that cost is so that he knows moving forward on an annual basis what that will look like. So it's been 6 years since the classification compensation study, so it makes sense that this is a priority and will continue to be something we look at each year.
Right. So our compensation philosophy, as Shelley said, was, median, which is the market, plus 5, and that becomes the midpoint for that particular range. And reaching the midpoint of that range within 6 years is important, and that's the goal. And so median plus 5%, and then midpoint by 6 years is the goal. And if you change jobs, if you get promoted, that clock starts over. So the 6 years starts over. So Luke has the question of when should we be getting our letters explaining everything? Luke, they go to the departments at the end of the month, at the end of September, and it should be the first week of October that you're receiving those individual letters. So if there's questions that you have after the letters, you're welcome to get with HR on those. There should be a detailed breakout for everybody, but that's when you should expect them from the staff perspective. Vida says,
Mark, can I add to that? Because I got another question. I'm not sure if everybody can see it, but it was also asking about the letters, as well as the process for employees to ask questions. HR will be doing a meeting for all employees, so they'll have more detail. My understanding is they will ask for some time frame to be able to research the questions. So if you could have employees first go through their supervisor and manager, and that way they might be able to answer some of the questions. But if it becomes a question of calculation or something that needs to escalate up to HR, the manager directors will forward those on to HR. By all means, anybody can go to HR, but they will ask for a process because it will help them respond more quickly to employees. And with 2,400 employees, they won't be able to respond to everybody the first day, but they are going to be looking at that period of time to be able to give them a chance to really look at the questions they receive.
So there's several questions here on the 6-year side of things. What I'm going to ask is that you wait to get that specific letter from HR. There's some individual aspects to that HR is going through right now of the time in position. I understand there's some questions about combining positions and some different things like that. I would ask that you wait for your specific letter from HR before we get into some of those detailed specific individual questions. We're happy to tell you what the philosophy is and kind of explain where that is. And I know that that may lead to some more questions, but really waiting to see what that HR letter has for you individually may help address some of those here in the short term. And that includes, so for those above the midpoint, do they get anything outside the standard 3%? So the 3% is really the across the board aspect. So if we're not moving you within the range, that's one aspect, but I would say also wait for your letter because there is some market aspects that they're looking at, but the 3% is the across the board. So everybody is getting at least 3%. Nobody is going down, everybody is going up at a minimum of 3%. But beyond that, I would ask you to wait for your individual letter to see if there is any other consideration on the individual basis. It says there was a distinction made between 6-year midpoint target and moving employees through their salary range based on their time in position. Can you clarify moving through the range? Again, one of the things that I would ask is we're doing some of that market analysis to make sure that the structure is staying where it needs to stay. Then there's also the 6 years to midpoint philosophy. So there's multiple elements to that. And again, I would ask everybody to wait for that letter for clarification. And then if you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to your director or to HR on that. So I think we've gotten a bunch of the questions. We're going to give another couple of minutes to see if we have any further questions. Lots of salary related stuff. And completely understand, folks, that's an important component for everybody. And we want to make sure we're as clear and transparent on the philosophy as well as what you can expect and the timeline that you can expect it in. So we appreciate the questions and appreciate everybody attending to hear more about the budget and hear more about how it impacts your area and the city as a whole. So we're going to wait just one more minute. We're making last call for any questions that are out there. Okay, I see Deb has a question. What is the budget, or is there a budget for mosquito? I think maybe you're talking about mosquito trapping or mosquito spraying. That Deb is part of the, there we go, spraying and trapping. I got lucky. It was a good guess. So that is part of the health department. Environmental health does our mosquito trapping and spraying. So we actually do have a budget for that. The specific budget is something that we would have to get with the health department as far as what the exact numbers are on that, but we do have that service provided within the Environmental Health and Sustainability Department. All right, last call. I think we've got the questions in there. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to go up through your manager or your director for some of those questions. But we appreciate everybody attending. Thank you very much for all that you do. Have a great weekend and stay safe.